How Britain Lost the World Without Losing a Single War. In 1939, Britain did not look like a country in trouble. In fact, it seemed unstoppable. It had land on every continent, a quarter of the world, and a quarter of its population. Its navy ruled the seas, its flag waved everywhere, and most importantly, its money controlled global trade. Sterling was not just a currency, it was the system the world used to transfer value. Britain was not merely an empire with an army. It was a financial system that happened to have an army. So how did an empire this powerful collapse in less than 40 years, without losing a major war, without its colonies suddenly becoming ungovernable? And not because Britain chose to let go. Its end came from something much simpler. Money stopped working. Empires usually don't collapse when they are defeated. They collapse when they can no longer finance themselves, and that is exactly what happened to Britain. After the First World War, the British Empire was at its peak. By 1920, it ruled nearly 14 million square miles of territory and more than 450 million people. But what truly made Britain powerful wasn't land, it was money. Sterling was the world's reserve currency. Global trade ran through it. Countries held their reserves in sterling. Banks trusted it. This created a powerful cycle. The world needed sterling. Britain could borrow at very low interest. Cheap borrowing financed a massive military. That military protected the empire. As long as this cycle continued, Britain could live beyond its means, and for a long time it did. The First World War changed everything. The cost of the war to Britain was roughly 14 times the country's annual economic output. That is difficult even to imagine. To pay this cost, Britain raised taxes, borrowed heavily, and was forced to sell the overseas investments it had accumulated over generations. Silently, a historic shift took place. Britain went from being the world's greatest creditor to becoming a nation that had to borrow. Worse still, to finance the war, it abandoned the gold standard. Sterling, backed by gold for centuries, now survived only on confidence, and confidence is fragile. In 1925, the attempt to return to gold at the old exchange rate made the currency severely overvalued, choked exports, and increased unemployment. The damage was large but not dramatic, which made it easy to ignore. If the First World War weakened the systems, the Second World War completely broke it. At the height of the war, more than half of Britain's entire economy was being spent simply to stay alive. This was no longer strategy. This was desperation. Britain sold its remaining assets. Its gold reserves were exhausted. Its overseas investments disappeared. By 1941, Britain was no longer financing a war. It was buying time. And that is when the United States appeared. The Lend-Lease program kept Britain alive, but it came with a price. In exchange for support, Britain agreed to open its empire to American trade and to accept U.S. financial conditions. This was not charity, it was leverage. By 1945, Britain's debt had reached about 250% of its economy. No empire can survive those numbers. A new financial order was created at Bretton Woods. Britain proposed a neutral global currency. America proposed the dollar. Only one country had the money to decide. The dollar won. Sterling lost its reserve status. And along with it, Britain lost the privilege of running endless deficits. This was not a technical adjustment. This was a transfer of power. In 1956, Britain tried one last time to act like a great power. The Suez Canal was nationalized. Britain intervened militarily and won militarily. But then the United States stepped in. Not with soldiers, with markets. Washington threatened to sell sterling, block IMF loans, and cut off oil supplies. Britain's reserves evaporated within days. Facing financial collapse, Britain backed down. Suez showed the world something very clearly. If someone else controls your money, your military power means nothing. From that point on, decline turned into liquidation. Colonies were no longer assets. They became costs, administration, defense, infrastructure, revolts. Britain could no longer afford any of it. Independence was not granted out of kindness. It was granted because the bills couldn't be paid. By 1976, Britain itself was forced to ask the IMF for support. The empire that once wrote the rules was now living under them. Britain did not fall because it was weak. It fell because it lost the system that financed its power. Empires do not collapse overnight. They run out of room to borrow. They run out of assets to sell. They run out of credibility. And eventually they run out of options. History does not repeat in the same way. But financial systems rhyme. Crowns disappear. Flags change. But mathematics never does. And when the numbers stop working, history does not ask permission. Don't forget to like the video and sub.